So last week we asked the question, what is your spiritual grit score? If you weren't here last week, I'll catch you up just really quick. We said, hey, when it comes down to making really difficult decisions, a lot of that comes down to how much spiritual grit you have. And so if we were to put it in scale terms, and I'll put some thought into this this past week, on a 1, I'm sticking with my original premise from last week. If you have a spiritual grit score of 1, it's like you walk into church and the band didn't play your favorite song, and so you just get bent out of shape. You're like, I just can't believe on this day when I needed it most, they weren't thinking of the song I needed them to hear, right? So that's a spiritual grit score of 1. And then last week, my example of a spiritual grit of 10 would have been Jesus. But the more I went on this week, I was like, you know what? That's probably not fair, because everybody's thinking, well, of course I'm not going to be Jesus, so I can't be a 10. So I was thinking, what's a 10 on our scale? And I've had some dealings, some interactions, some interweaving with some ministry things with a group called Operation Mobilization over the last 10 years. And so they serve a number of countries all over the world, but they in particular have a number of people that are in places where you can't talk about serving the church. And there are people that are serving in underground churches, people who are in jail right now for their faith, are persecuted for it. I would say they could qualify as a 10 on the spiritual grit scale. Like the guy right now at the moment that's in some Middle Eastern jail or in Asia over that way in a jail right now for his faith, they get the 10. Right, so that's doable for us because those are other people just like us. So we've got 1, your pants are in a wad because they didn't play your song, and you're 1 on the spiritual grit scale. 10 is you're willing to go to jail for your faith because you're in an underground church planting in a place where you can't say the name Jesus out loud. So those are our things. So last week I asked you, hey, what is your spiritual grit number? And we followed that up with, how do you increase it, right? How do you increase it? Well, we defined grit as this. Grit is courage and resolve, strength of character. So in terms of our spiritual grit score, our spiritual courage and resolve, our spiritual strength of character. How can you increase this? We said it was simple. You increase your spiritual grit score by taking part in spiritual disciplines. Super practical way to do this, right? So super practical way to do this. We just want to throw it out there to you right now. So, in fact, you should probably take out your phone. If you write down notes, you should bring it out. This is the part you want to do this. So 2 weeks from today, on the 23rd, am I doing that right? 23rd, we open up foundation group signups, right? And so that's happening. It won't happen here on a Sunday morning. It happens Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock. So let me tell you how this works. So at 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, our website will automatically open all of the groups. Right now, I think we have 10, 11 groups, something like that. We've got the most groups we've ever had before, which is great. Here's the problem. Most of the time, the groups that we have open on day 1, almost all of them fill up like in less than 5 minutes. So you kind of got to be sitting at your computer waiting to register. And there's a cap. So we put a number for how many people can fit in a house, and we don't allow people to register over that number, right? And so a lot of times, and it causes some issues, like people will call and say, hey, but I really wanted to get into that group. And I said, get a faster computer next time. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. Invest a little bit in your spiritual thing. I don't know. So we got groups Monday, Tuesday, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Sunday through Thursday night. All those days, the end in Y, that's what we have groups. And so they're all over the place. They're in people's houses, all over the community. And so go ahead and put it on your calendar at 3 o'clock. If you're talking about, hey, what's a simple step in terms of spiritual disciplines that I can jump in on, group would qualify as one of those things, right? You're going to meet new people. The reason that we do signups is because we want people to meet new people. Because there's this potential for a group to get together, and then they're together for like 50 years, and they have no friends other than that group right there. And so we don't want that to happen. We like new people to get involved with new people. We think it's a really easy way for people who are disconnected from Jesus to get connected in a group. So I promise you, if you sign up for a group, when you show up at that group, you will not be the only person that's never been there before. There's going to be a whole heap of folks. Some people will get in from the previous group, and then most of the folks will be new. It just depends on how fast. If you get a Mac, you've probably got an advantage. I think that's the way it works. I don't know. Maybe? I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm doing. Actually, I'm leading the group, so I don't have to sign up. I'm already signed up. So I get the group I want. If you want the group you want, you should lead a group. How about that? That's a good plug. How about that? Yeah. How about it? Just see Barrett. Barrett.com, Home Depot. He's at corporate all week. Okay. I'm so off the thing. Look, all I was supposed to say is, hey, that's a really simple spiritual discipline you can get involved in, and now we've done it. Today, though, we're not talking about groups, right? We'll do that in 2 weeks. Today, we're not talking about groups. We're continuing in the book of Daniel because Daniel gives us an incredible picture of what spiritual grit looks like. And so last week we kind of started, I don't want to get back into that, but this week, in addition to our spiritual grit score, in addition to spiritual disciplines, there is one other word, and I want to see if you find it as we go throughout the teaching today. There's one additional word. It's the sauce for spiritual grit. If you can get this sauce and put it on your spiritual grit, it's just like, that's what's going to happen to it, right? So you got to find it. I already know what it is because I wrote the message, but we're just going to dive in and see if you can hear that's the sauce. That's what he's talking about. And it isn't me. It's what Daniel, that means what's God talking about. It's going to be good. Here's the deal. Let me give you a brief summary. Nebuchadnezzar was a king. He's the guy that went, sieged Jerusalem, took the Israelites, exiled them over into, now they're in modern day Iraq, I believe, and they're in Babylon. And so there's this huge gap between where Jerusalem is and now where Babylon is. He's brought the best and brightest over. He's the king. He's not a God-fearer. He doesn't believe in Jehovah. He worships a million gods, probably not a million, at least a dozen, and he's very happy with those little g gods, and he thinks they hung the moon, hung the stars, all those things. And so he's got this crew here that are Jewish, and they're incredible guys, right? Great guys. And we're going to find out what they do. And so, but before that happens, he says, hey, I got this idea. I want to build an image of gold. But not just any image of gold. Most of his gods had images of gold. They were teeny weeny, like maybe this size. They would sit on a little pedestal like this in a temple, and people would light things on fire, and it would smoke up the room, and they would put food on it, and then pretend that the god ate it, and come back and eat it themselves, and then tell everybody it disappeared, the god ate it, those kind of things. Well, he wanted to make a bigger image of gold, so he made one 90 foot tall, 9 foot wide. So just picture in your mind, 90 foot tall, 9 foot wide, this enormous image of gold. And he said, hey, I'm going to make it simple for you. I made this image of gold, and it's so special. It's real simple. All I want you to do, music plays, your face hits the floor. That's it. It's that simple. We're going to gather around the image of gold. The music is going to play. You bow down. Face to the floor. His entire nation. They've all gathered. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered. This 90-foot tall gold statue. 9 foot wide. Music plays, face hits the ground. That's a problem for people who worship Yahweh, who worship Jehovah, who worship God. Because God was very specific with them. Don't do that. He said it in fancier words, but he said, don't do that. Do not worship another God. Thou shalt not even. Don't do that. And so what we find in Daniel chapter 3, verse 12, here it comes. But there are some Jews, these are some people that are coming to report, they're tattletalers. But there are some Jews whom you have set, they're talking to the king, whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. And so there's these folks that grew up in Babylon. They're chief, they're provinces, they're in charge of things, they're leaders, and they're hanging out. And they're there. Their music plays, face hits the floor. And they notice that there are 3 guys that aren't face hitting the floor when the music plays. And so instead of going to them and say, hey, fellas, I mean, you need to know it's supposed to be on the ground when this is happening, that kind of thing. Instead of having that conversation, they just go straight to the king because they were looking for something to go to the king about. They were jealous of the rise and power that these Jewish folks had, these God-fearers had. And so they were looking for something to go to the king and say, hey, these guys that you promoted to these big spaces, notice the language there, that are in charge of all these things that you put in, they don't respect you, king. They don't respect you. Do you notice the last word of it? We'll keep it on the screen. They neither serve the gods, your gods, nor worship the image of gold you set up. They disrespect you. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, what a statement. If there are things that can be said about me as a person, as a dad and as a father and as a community person, someone in the community, as a neighbor, what an incredible statement. For them to say, hey, he doesn't worship everyone else's gods. And he doesn't bow down to fake statues of gold. Like, that is something to be said about me. And I begin to ask the question, though. We don't have a 90-foot, 9-foot wide statue of gold when the music plays that we have to bow down to. So what are the gods in our lives that when something happens, immediately we respond and begin to worship? Maybe our worship doesn't look like what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were attempting to remove themselves from. Maybe it doesn't look like what the hundreds of thousands of people in Babylon were on their face doing. Maybe it doesn't look like that. But what does it look like? Ultimately, this is where I landed. They've gotten in trouble for being obedient to God. Now that stinks, doesn't it? I mean, think about your kids. You know? Do they like to get into trouble? Especially when it's something you told them to do? Man, that's the worst. That's the worst. When I tell one of my kids to do something, they go to school and do it, and they're like, well, that's what Dad told me to do, you know? And then I get a note home, stop telling your kid to do that, you know? I don't know. I had this thing when Emerson was in preschool. There was this, he got bit a couple times. And so I said, hey, next time he bites you, you sock him in the nose. Right? And he told his teacher that's what I told him. They're like, we don't tell kids to hit people. I was like, well, you don't tell them not to bite either. I don't know what to say. That was wrong. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. If it makes you any better, I said, hey, let's practice. And Emerson started to take off his shoes and take off his sock. I don't know what he was going to do with it, but that's it. That's what a 3-year-old does. You know, I don't know. At the end of the day, following Jesus will get us into trouble. I hope that's something that you recognize. Following Jesus will get you into trouble. It means that you'll be peacemaking when everyone else is pot stirring. You know what I'm talking about? It means that you'll be grace giving when everyone else is out for vengeance. It means that you'll be standing up for those being bullied because you know they can't stand up for themselves. It means you'll be passing up dishonest opportunities that would better your career. It means you're willing to call out a friend when they're about to make a huge mistake. Staying with them after they've made it. And then inspiring them to make a change as a result of it. All of those things cause trouble in our world. All of those things cause trouble and hiccups in your life. Yet as followers of Jesus, that's ultimately where we want to be. On our spiritual grit score, when someone in the office comes and says, hey, we've got this thing that we can do, and if this happens, it really puts you at the forefront for this next promotion, but that thing is dishonest, when it's not a legit thing, then all of a sudden, that's a question of spiritual grit. Like, I know what I'm supposed to do, but am I willing to keep my nose off the floor when the music plays? Am I willing to make sure that I'm still standing upright when everyone else in my world has bowed down to the thing that isn't actually a God? Spiritual grit. It requires, when you see someone in your life being put down, in high school, middle school, we'll call it bullied, elementary school, bullied, it means that you step in between them. And we have talked about this as a church. You step in between it. You don't go tell someone else, you do something about it. And that will sometimes cause trouble for you. But that trouble's worth it when you're doing the right thing. Spiritual grit. Remember, the 10s are the guys and girls sitting in a prison this morning because they said, I've got people in my neighborhood who must know Jesus, and I'm willing to do something about it, even if it costs me all I've got. How do we increase our spiritual grit? So they're given a choice. The king hears about this disobedience. He's like, bring them to me. And so they show up. He knows who they are, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I'm going to give you a choice. And this is where the king says, He says, hey, bow down. But then he picks up verse 3, verse 15, or chapter 3, verse 15. He says, but if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? That's the king talking. I'm going to read it to you again. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? He said, hey, here's the deal, fellas. Your life is right here. And I decide how much to squeeze on it. And if you don't do what I say, what God in his right mind can take you out of my hand? And I will squeeze the life out of you if you don't do what I ask. Where are people squeezing you in life? Where are people squeezing you when you know that you should be doing something differently? Yeah, ain't nobody probably, said, hey, I'm going to throw you into a furnace if you don't do what I ask. That probably hasn't happened. But what have they said to you? Think about it right now. Maybe some of you are being squeezed at this moment, and there's a decision to be made this week, and they're just waiting for you to see. And that's what they've said. They probably had conversations. I've got him right where I want him. He has no choice. Oh, she'll do it. Yeah, for sure. She'll do it. Was she going to give up her entire career for this? It's here that their grit is tested. What can they withstand? It's here that we find the sauce that goes on the spiritual grit that just explodes from there, gets larger. It's one word. One word. Integrity. The definition of integrity is the state of being whole and undivided. The state of being whole and undivided. Integrity is the fuel for grit. It's the sauce that just makes it just like that. Integrity. Now, we've probably heard the definition. Integrity is what you do when no one's watching, right? Like, hey, that's when you've got real integrity. When nobody's watching, are you still able to do the right thing? And I think that's right. Integrity is what you do when no one is watching, but it's also what you do when you have everything to lose. Right? When everything's on the line, and it will cost you your way of life and way of living, that's when we see when your integrity really is. Because in the dark, the only person that knows is you and God. And hopefully you can fix that. Hopefully in the dark, when no one's watching, that you can begin to continue to make really good decisions. But at the end of the day, when everyone is watching, and at the end of the day, when everyone understands your entire life is on the line, your entire career is on the line, a few important relationships to you are on the line, are you able to be undivided? Are you able to be whole? Are you able to have spiritual grit with the integrity sauce on it that says, hey, here it is. It is. And then if that's the case, you'll respond like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do. He says this, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. So he says, hey, here's the deal. What God is going to deliver you from this hand right here? Ain't nobody delivering you. And their response to that is not, but. Or, well, hold on a second, slow down. Let's not anyone make any haste. They don't say that. They just say, honestly, dude, well, I don't have to defend myself here. I don't have to defend myself to you. It reminds me, I never asked him. I should have asked him, but I never got a chance to ask him. He just said it to me all the time. My grandfather would say this phrase. And every time I read this story, I think this is where he got it from. He would say this, Clint, a life of integrity needs no words to defend it. A life of integrity needs no words to defend it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are like, bruh, keep squeezing. I don't need to defend myself on this to you. And then he kind of puts a period on the end of this. In 3:17 and 18, he says, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Man, I want to be able to say that. I want to be able to look at the guy that's squeezing and just say, honestly, if God wanted me to get out of this, he could get me out of it. But even if he doesn't, I'm still not going to do what you asked me to do. Because my spiritual grit's been climbing. And I got so much integrity sauce I'm putting all over this thing is drenched. So I'm not divided. I am whole. And I've made my mind. I have resolve. And there's nothing you can squeeze in me that will make me change my mind. So you do you. Because I've already decided how I'm going to do me. Wow. Wow. Ladies, if you're single, find a man like that. You know? Right? Fellas, if you're single, find you a girl. It says, hey, I don't care what you decide. I've already decided what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus. And I'm not going to compromise for you. I don't need to defend myself in this place. Because I'm whole. And I have resolve. And my spiritual grit score is climbing. And I've got the integrity sauce. And I don't need you to understand that, to feel better about it. He says, we ain't scared. At the end of the day, this is what they're saying. To put it into our context, into our terms, here it is. Forever trumps the temporary. It's saying, I can make a decision now because I understand the idea of forever in exchange for squeeze what's temporary. Take all the life out of it. Because at the end of the day, you can't touch my forever. And so I'm going to stay whole and attached to that while you attempt to detach me, to separate me from here. But I'm whole. I have my resolve. Forever trumps the temporary. Because temporary is temporary. Sometimes we forget as followers of Jesus just how temporary things are. And so we convince ourselves, you know what, but I ain't never had it this good. And that would be even better. And oh man, but even if you have it that good, and even if you get a +2, if it's this good +2, it's still just temporary. It's not forever. It's not promised. It's just temporary. Which, if you've been here a long time, you've heard me say this before. If you are a follower of Jesus and you want to be a part of what we are doing, then as followers of Jesus, if you follow Jesus the most, you know what's about to come. This has upset so many people every time I say it. So get ready. Get your email out because you're going to send them to me. And I'm just going to say I don't have to defend myself in this way before you. If you follow Jesus and you've been following him the most, you should give the most, sacrifice the most, and your preferences should matter the least. Because this last part, this preferences thing, because it's all temporary. And as followers of Jesus, we will say, hey, here's the deal. Everything I've got's temporary except for Jesus. And so you want to play music that I don't like? It's fine. It's just temporary. The drums were too loud this morning. I'll get over it because it was too temporary. You know, we never had anybody come tell us the drum was too loud. I think it's because I say that because they know I'm like, well, your preferences don't matter to me anyway, you know. Oh, you're lost? Well, we can have a conversation about it, you know. We just say, hey, here it is. We're putting all our chips on the table. As followers of Jesus, this temporary life, there's so many times people say you need to make your decisions that are forever, that impact who you are forever, base it upon temporary light affliction. There's these things that are happening in our life that are just so temporal. I'm like, no, we're good. It would be great if we could hold these things and keep forever, but I'm not going to trade them out. That's what they're saying. If that was language you didn't like, I'll soften it a little bit. Here's your nursery rhyme for the week. I prefer God's will over my wishes. Maybe that's a little less controversial, right? A little less controversial. Still the same thing. You can tweet that, you know, and people aren't going to comment you to death. At the end of the day, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego decided this. Our grit is stronger than your punishment, because our grit is fueled by our integrity. There's no punishment, there's no consequence that you can hold over my head that means more to me than what I've already valued in my integrity. And so if we put a dollar amount on my integrity, I don't know what the dollar amount is, but put a dollar amount on my life, and this one's still going to be more, he says. This is a good place to be. Do you know the reaction of Nebuchadnezzar? He loses his mind. He's like, what? What did you say? He's probably not yelling. No, he's probably whispering. I don't know what he's doing. I'm trying to imagine. That's probably what I would do. I would say, why did you say that in my good ear? What did you say? And then he tells his people, he says, hey, heat up the furnace. It's already going to kill him, but I don't want it to kill him. I want them to kill him. I want it to kill him. So heat it up 7 times hotter than it's ever been. That's what the Bible tells us. Nebuchadnezzar loses his mind. He's like, you ain't going to tell me what you're going to do in my kingdom. I made the image. I made the gold, 90 foot high, 9 foot wide. You've never seen anything like this before. Get your noses on the ground. And if you ain't, 7 times hotter. It ain't enough for me to take your life. I want to take your life. 7 times hotter. And just in case he thought they were going to struggle to be thrown in, he said, tie him up too. So they tie him up. So they begin to tie up these guys, and there's 3 of them, and they're all there, tied up in rope, and they're laying on the floor, or maybe they're standing up, I'm not sure, but it takes some guys, they're going to have to throw them in this thing. And I don't know what the furnace looks like. I'm not sure if it's just one of them pizza ovens at Positano's. Have y'all been there, by the way? It's the greatest pizza in Newnan. It's so good. My goodness. If you want to weigh to my heart, take me to pizza. You know what I'm saying? That's not, you know what I'm talking about, those big old ovens? I don't know if it's just a giant one you can walk in, right? I don't know, but these guys have to pick them up, open some kind of door, because the Bible says when they opened the door, it was so stinking hot that the guys that were trying to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in, they died. Right there. The heat was so intense. And they were done. And so they are. 3 of them in the fire. 3 of them being squeezed. 3 of them being poured out in their consequences for their behavior of having integrity and spiritual grit. Spiritual grit to a 10 said, hey, you can do whatever you want to with your hands. You can squeeze whatever you've got in us with your hands. But at the end of the day, we actually rest in someone else's hands who are much bigger than yours. And so he can save us, but even if he don't, we're still not doing what you ask us to do. Because our spiritual grit is climbing. And I got that integrity sauce we put all over it. And then we find, every once in a while we have these moments. These miracle moments when God steps in a way that we wish he would for every single time we came to him with it. And we get to look at one here where it says, Daniel 3:24 and 25, Nebuchadnezzar's looking into the furnace, and he says, then Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement. And he asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound, unharmed, and the 4th looks like the son of the gods. there was another one in the fire. There was another one in the fire. One that looked like a son of the gods. Boy, man, he was so close. He just lowercased that G and put an S on it, but he was so close. Nebuchadnezzar was so close to seeing what was actually happening in front of him, because he was still fixated on what he had in his hand, and he was like, and this is how I take your life. This is how I end this. This is what happens when you disobey me. This is what happens when you don't follow through on the things I want you to follow through on. In the end, they walk out. They walk out and they're face to face with Nebuchadnezzar. And the Bible tells us he goes over and smells them, because they didn't even smell like they had been in fire. And he doesn't know. Only 3 walk out. Only 3. But he's sure there was another one in the fire. And so he's smelling, he's like, what is this? What is this? The question becomes, is that possible today? If you just stay resolved and your spiritual grit continues to increase, and you continue to be whole and resolved and resolute, and you have integrity, if you have those things and you still end up in the fire, will there be another one with you? Well, according to Jesus, yes. Listen closely to his words. Matthew 28 says, then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So you're being squeezed? Is there a furnace awaiting you? If that's the case, that's all right. Because with you, there'll be another one in the fire. With you, you will not be alone. Because Jesus said, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. If you're a follower of Jesus, you already knew this. Maybe it's just a good reminder in the midst of the season of pressing and crushing that you possibly are experiencing. Or maybe you're going to file away in your back pocket for the pressing and crushing that's coming. But if you are new to Jesus, if you're here for the first time this morning, or you haven't been in church in a decade or 2 decades, or maybe you've never been to a church before, and you're like, I didn't even think I went to church this morning. We're in a high school auditorium. Praise the Lord. You're right. You can have Jesus in the fire with you as well. It doesn't require this long-term commitment of a relationship for 10 years that, man, we've been together for 10 years now, and now he'll stand with me in the fire. No, that's a momentary decision where you say, you know what? I would like to give my entire life to Jesus, and Jesus, who you thought was so far away, will be right there next to you saying, I'm ready. I'm ready, and I'm already ahead of you in the moments of fire that are coming. I'm already standing in the fire waiting for you, so that when you get there and you walk in and you say, my grit score is rising and I've got integrity sauce all over my life, and it's all right because there's another one in the fire with me. He's waiting. And that is doable for you. That is doable for you. Life will be full of pressing and crushing. Life will be full of furnaces where someone else makes a decision because we made the right decision, and we will suffer for it. And that's okay, because we're not alone standing in the fire. Forever trumps the temporary. God's will over my wishes. spiritual grit fueled by integrity. That's what we're called to. That's what we're chasing. That's what Jesus offers. That's what God is calling you to. That moment in your heart, at this moment, is the Holy Spirit saying, yes, move into me. Let me go. Let me have it. Let me walk with you towards that furnace. Here's the truth. Write it down. Take it to the bank. As long as we follow Jesus, there'll be another one in the fire.